that it's time for new speakers to come on. And so, Brooke, I will see you next time, I think later today, actually. And let's take it away with, so I think that our next speakers are Rick and Erica. And so which one of you, so wave if you want to go first. Erica's gonna go first. Please come on up.
Cool. Hey, Tanya. My name's Erica. I'm the COO and co-founder and generally a huge security nerd for a company called SafeStack. We use cybersecurity and secure development, education, and community work.
Awesome. Thank you for introducing yourselves. I didn't even need to ask, which was kind of amazing. So this session, so the next hour that I'm hosting is all going to be about metrics and data around AppSec. And it's funny because I heard Maria maybe 25 minutes ago saying all my answers are going to be about data. And I'm like, oh yeah. So I mean, the first question that I have is, what types of metrics for application security would you want to gather and why for each one of them, if I may?
Yeah, definitely. So from my perspective, the metrics that you want to collect are really going to depend on what's involved in your AppSec program. Your organization might have like a pretty structured program that kind of involves various AppSec activities or particular security domains. So it really kind of depends on what those bits are and perhaps where you're at with that. If you're just now establishing maybe a threat modeling practice within your organization, it's going to be at the very early onset, right? The teams will only just be kind of getting into it, so you won't have a whole lot to go on. Versus if you've already been perhaps maybe tracking vulnerabilities as part of your life cycles, and that's been going on for a while, it will look a little bit different. So for me, the metrics you want to collect very much depends on the activities and the domains that you're looking at. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
So basically, depending upon what the goals are of your program, you want to collect metrics around that. Okay, so that's great. And I agree, just to be clear. So let's say we have certain goals, then so I guess I might consider as an AppSec nerd, different returns on investment than someone else might. So what could be perhaps like things we would measure that we would want to show management so management feels the return on investment?
100%. And it's so hard in security, right? Because it very rarely kind of goes back to we're making money for the business, so therefore that's our return on investment. So it's always, you've got to think, I guess, maybe a little bit creatively. And you're exactly right, Tanya. Like with everything with metrics, it always has to tie back to what type of business question, what type of business goal are you trying to achieve by having this activity? For example, like using threat modeling, for example, because I really love that as a hard one to really kind of quantify. Your organization probably does threat modeling because you want to get a really good sense of the risks of the things that you're designing and making sure you're thinking about things up front, capturing those security requirements before it reaches all the way through to production and you have a bad time, right? So in the early stages, from a business perspective, if we look at the concept of a threat modeling activity, the whole goal is that you're able to identify the most critical security requirements for that thing, and you're able to prioritize that stuff along with a plethora of things that are probably on the team's backlogs, right? So the whole goal is all about making sure that we're, one, prioritizing the right security requirements, but two, we're focusing on the ones that kind of are actually real for that design and are actually, I guess, could give rise to real risks. So the actual business goal and business perspective is that we're making the most effective use of our time. So therefore, you probably want to start thinking about like, okay, if that's where perhaps we want our security requirements to come from, is from that earlier stages. Some of the metrics you might track is, what is the coverage of apps that have threat models that don't? Because looking at just a raw number of how many threat modeling, documents do we have in a particular folder tells you nothing. It's got like zero context. You could have done like 10 threat modeling exercises across, your lowest risk apps because those were the easiest ones to accomplish, right? Versus if you have one, but it's for the meaty, chunky, huge system that your business depends on, that's in a much better situation, and the context changes based off of that information. So, being able to track, the coverage of how many of our systems actually have been included as part of one of these exercises, starting to think about like, okay, for those particular systems, where have those various requirements or security work that we've identified, at what stage have those kind of come up? Is threat modeling actually being helpful because they're appearing earlier on and we're able to action them sooner? Or are we finding out about the security work because there was a vulnerability found after, or something was reported, or there was a bug? So being able to tell the effectiveness of that. So that's another metric that you could track in terms of where is that security work actually coming from. And then there's the other standard, metrics that you could start thinking about in terms of, okay, so how many sprint cycles have passed since we've identified those things in the threat model? How much work was identified versus work that was released versus work that was prioritized? Like once you start really thinking about, okay, what is the business goal? You can start to really drill down of, okay, how can we look at this and tell if it's actually helping us prioritize and helping us be effective?
This is such a good answer. Okay, so soon we're going to go on to Rick. So I have one last question, and it's hard to choose because I actually had a whole bunch planned for you. So if you could just gather one metric of all of them, what would that metric be and why?
Ooh, that's like the Cinderella slipper of like metrics. I think it's not really one that's going to help you solve all of your problems, but I truly think coverage of some of your activities is most important. Like regardless of what the control or the security domain might be, whether or not it's some type of secure design or threat modeling activity, if it's vulnerability management, if it's doing particular types of testing or code reviews, the coverage of what you have and what you're doing for perhaps what your business determines to be more critical versus the stuff that you're doing for everything else. I think coverage is probably the most important. That will really give you a sense of, when you're looking at metrics for, let's say, vulnerability management, but your coverage is only at about 25%. Well, you know that those metrics really aren't giving you a really good indicative idea of how your organization is doing. So it really allows you to adjust that context appropriately. So I'd say coverage would be the most critical one.
I totally agree. Oh my gosh, Erica, that was great. Thank you very much. And so I'm going to ask Rick to come up now and unmute. And Rick, I kind of don't want to ask you the same things I just asked Erica, but I do also.
That's fine.
So I'm going to ask them in a different way. How can we use metrics to tell if we're doing a good job? Or how can we explain with data, like, hey, look, we are doing well, or we're not doing well, and I need more resources. How could we use data for that?
Right. So first I want to say, I agree with everything Erica said. Love all that. And I also love the discussion about threat modeling. Huge fan of threat modeling 15, 20 years ago. And then it kind of went out of favor, right? Like 10 years ago, 5 years ago. But I think cloud has brought it back because cloud is so complex and that it kind of lends itself to threat modeling. So very excited to have that come back. So to me, it comes down to quality. That's the key word. Quality is quality and security are kind of like equality breeds security, I guess is what I would say. So if we just go to the basics of measuring quality, we can then be more secure. Like Erica said, it's like every company, depending on how many developers, the type of development you do, the type of platforms you have, they have metrics for checking these things. But quality, there's testing at all different phases, right? So there's the unit testing, there's the stuff that goes into repo that magically tests it, there's stuff that goes in system, there's the code review tools, there's the infrastructure code reviews. But the other thing that we have is a lot more complexity now than we did 15 years ago. I ran ethical hacking teams from the late 90s to the late 2000s. So the early online banking applications back in the 90s, 98, 99, that we were doing are vastly simpler than what we are now. And so when it comes to the quality, and I'm answering your question in the long form in the narrative.
No, it's good. I like it.
And that is it also comes to integrations. And so it's not just, do I have an interface? Does it have the functionality? Am I pulling the right data? It's weird because I have this flipped. I'm used, in Zoom, you're used to it being mirrored. And so my hand's over here and I'm expecting it to be over there. Anyway, so when I talk my hands, it's like distracting. Anyway, but now you have, the developer may be creating infrastructure code or calling a configuration file for infrastructure code. They're doing API calls. I love the discussion, the previous one, talking about no code, low code, which our developers have nothing to do with, that somebody else does. I just wanted to throw that plug in there. Using of credentials, access to different data elements, access to different, types of things, that the temporal effect of these things. And so, in this infrastructure code, you start having drift because things are updated or not there, and it is your configuration files become out of sync with what you're trying to do. So all of these different things come back to quality. And so if we do all of these right, then we're going to be more secure, because this is going to help us reduce the introduction of configuration errors. And then when we do vulnerabilities, it's going to reduce it's going to kind of reduce the commodity vulnerabilities. And that's the metric that I really like to see. Going back to my pen test days, and I'm going to say something controversial, which we love doing on panels, right? Which is like, I think that we need to be more positive. Well, this is not controversial. We need more positive reinforcement than negative reinforcement. It's like, oh my gosh, I had this many bugs and therefore it's that. It's like, no, if you have quality code that's always clean and it's integrating with everything, then you're going to get more benefits, et cetera, et cetera. But coming from, like, when we get to the point where we're doing pen testing at the end, after all this stuff is in there and we get a pen test against this platform, the number that I'm looking at is the number of commodity vulnerabilities. If there is some severe critical vulnerability because I had, one of my hackers write some fuzzing tool or do something complicated to get in, great, but I'm not beating up the developer about that. And exactly 20 years ago, this was 2004. My team was testing a online casino blackjack app. It was a Java application, client server Java application. So we wrote, well, I didn't write it, but one of my guys wrote a tool to be able to get in the middle of the serialized Java object and be able to manipulate thing. And first rule of web security, application security, is don't trust the client, right? But you figure I have a vetted, my own client that is serialized, that's an executable that, like, no one can touch that. Like, don't expect that. I'm not beating up with them about that. This took exceptional effort. This is like the MacGyver level of comprehensiveness. I'm not beating them up over it, and I want them to just, like, yes, we'll fix it. But it's the commodity stuff, that the quality and all the stuff that Erica talked about, get that out of the way. And then let's find those little nuanced things that only a MacGyver will be able to find.
Oh, this is awesome, Rick. And so we have 2 minutes left. Could you introduce yourself? Because I wanted you to introduce yourself, but then I asked the question because I was excited
That's
to
fine.
ask you.
So hi, my name is Rick Doten. I'm a VP at Centene Corporation, and I'm the fractional CISO for all of the health plans and subsidiaries and international properties.
Absolutely. Okay, so super quick. So first of all, I loved your answer. Oh my gosh. If you could just have one metric that you get to show management or that you get to gather, what would it be?
I go back to quality. It's just like the things that were implemented without any incident not being security, but that worked and that stayed working and continue to work without any drift or any problems and or change in configuration. It was like, hey, this is the stuff that went in went in right the first time and is staying that way.
That's so good. I feel like I'm gonna like everyone's answer to that question. Rick and Erica, thank you so much for coming to the journey to AppSec maturity with the Purple Book community. I really appreciate you being here and taking the time. Thank you so much.
No, my
Thanks,
pleasure.
Tanya.